Welcome to the Winners Table, where when you sit with the winners, the conversation is different. I'm your host, Amber Wright, and today I am joined by Ms. Chanel Martin of the Kingdom Business Network, Mr. Mike Goodwin, comedian and keynote speaker, and Ms. Watchen Nyanue, the CEO of I Choose the Ladder. Welcome, everybody.
What up?
Hey, how's everybody feeling today? We feeling good?
Feeling good.
Feeling good.
All right, today's conversation is about leaving the 9 to 5.
Oh, yeah.
This is a journey that some of us have to take. Some folks have never worked before. Right. They just are like, that ain't my thing and I don't want to do it. Mm-hmm. But for others, the journey has been, I was employed and I had a side hustle that turned into a business that I now run full time. Where do you stand on that? Did you, before you entered your businesses, were you employed by someone else? Are you currently employed now?
I was. And so I've boomeranged, for lack of a better phrase. So the business that I run now is the 6th business that I've started. But the one prior to this, I was in corporate, left corporate, did that full time. That failed, went back into corporate, and then transitioned out full time about 2 years ago to run this current business.
Okay. Wow, that's a lot of movement. Mm-hmm. What about you?
So 10 years ago, I left the job to do what I'm doing now.
Okay. Was it like G14 classified? You can't talk about it?
No. I worked at a private school, independent school. I was the college counselor at a school.
Okay, awesome. And that was, you said, about 10 years ago?
10 years ago.
Oh, okay. How about you?
I left corporate America 10 years ago as well to do probably the 5th job I'm on, 5th business I'm on right now. One of many, yeah.
Okay, there's something about that 10-year mark. I'll hit 10 years in doing this work very soon, but I've had different jobs along the journey. I went back to corporate for the last 2 years during the pandemic and have re-entered my business full time recently. So it is kind of like a boomerang. You're in and out. Mm-hmm. And that can be, it has its advantages and its disadvantages, would you say? Mm-hmm. So we've got 2 folks who have just done their work in their businesses full time, and we've got 2 people who've done other things. So what are those differences like? What was that transition like for you? We'll start with you, Watchen, with deciding whether or not to stay, because 6 businesses also is a lot too. Mm-hmm. So to do that in the margins of your life when you're employed full time, talk to us about what that journey was like for you.
So I think like if you have the entrepreneurial itch, you have it, right? Like and that can be developed over time. But like there are some people who are just like, I'm going to do a thing, right? But also part of that is like, you're going to do that thing prematurely, which for a lot of the things that failed, like it was not the right time. I didn't understand enough about running a business. The last company prior to this one, we shut it down because I realized I was building a business that I didn't actually want to run. Mm-hmm. So we had clients, we had customers, and I was like, I don't want to do this anymore, right? And so I needed to be able to support myself because I say this all the time, like I'm really good at making money, and the only thing I'm better at is spending money, right? Because girl be out here just like, right? So like once it was like, okay, the revenue's not gonna come through the business, it was like, okay, you have to get another job. Mm-hmm. But I think the second time around, so I was an executive for the WNBA team in Chicago, and then COVID happened, so they weren't playing basketball, so I could work on my business more full time. Okay. And then when they came back, it was, I had worked for more than 15 years to establish my reputation, to have like goodwill in my name, and the amount of time that was going to be required in my business to make it successful, and the amount of time that was going to be required as an executive, like I just could not do both well. Okay. And so it was like, okay, what are you going to do? And I talked to my therapist, and she was like, well, you seem happy you're running a business full time. Why not just do that? Like you are always going to be able to find a job. So take that leap. And surprisingly, so I resigned a year prior to leaving, and they did not accept my resignation. And so for a year, we figured out like, okay, what's in your best interest and what's in my best interest. Mm-hmm. And so they were my first client. My last full-time job that I left was my first full-time client in my when I became an entrepreneur full-time.
What about you, Mike?
And
talk to
if
us
you're
about
not
what
so antsy to leave.
Okay.
I think, so I was in my position for 8 years doing comedy. I wasn't good enough to leave. So there's because I wasn't a good comedian. For me, I worked for 8 years. What really kind of moved the needle for me, I was making half of my salary doing stand-up on the side for about 3 years. Okay. And so I was like, wow, if I was able to focus solely on this, I could really blow this up. And then the other thing that really prompted me to start thinking about going full time was I was losing comedic opportunities. Yeah. Like before, I was able to kind of have some scheduling ability to take time off and to go and do these things. But now I was finding times where I was losing opportunities comedically, and I was showing up to comedic opportunities tired because my job was so demanding. So I would show up, and be mediocre at the thing that I really want to do. And I was like, oh, I gotta get out of here.
That's kind of how it played out for me too. I worked at the same university for 7 years. And I did that full time, and then I taught college courses at night. And so, my family's from Honduras, we're not Jamaican, but I identified, I got trained job, right? Like I was always doing a variety of different things, and every few years I would phase one of my jobs out. But it was very similar for me when it felt like whatever I was doing primarily was getting in the way of what was in the margin, and I losing opportunities, not able to travel to events or having to ask for time off and things like that. That was always a sign for me that, okay, it might be time to make a transition, but also I believe in being strategic in that transition and not being antsy, and because hello, bills.
Right.
And I have, young children, and so really having to be measured and thinking about what types of steps that I was taking. And almost to your point, Watchen, I figured out how could I leverage opportunities that I have at this job that serve my business. So there is a way to find harmony between your employment and your entrepreneurial endeavors if you take your time and you think about it. So how about for you, Chanel? How did that play out for you?
So I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I actually became a chemical engineer because I wanted to create something in the hair and beauty space as an engineer.
Wow.
And that was my first entrepreneurial venture. I worked in plants. I made baby wipes, toilet tissue, paper towels. I know, right? You think I'm gonna be, in the lab. And I'm in a whole stanky paper mill, okay? Yeah, it's as bad as it feels and sounds. It was bad. But I learned so many great skills and problem solving skills as an engineer. I think like an engineer, and that has totally helped me in business. Okay. And I got an opportunity to move back to Atlanta, and I was gonna work for AT&T. I don't know how, but I was like, whatever, I'll take it. It was a project management position. I knew I was on a time clock, okay? Like, I didn't want to go to no corporate stuff. They was like, join the soccer team. I was like, nope. They was like, you want to eat with us? Nope.
You was like,
I was like, I knew, and at this time, we were building our hair tech company, and what was happening was similar to all of you. When you talked about opportunities, I used all my vacation time. And so I remember one time, we had just won this big tech competition, and we were getting some funding. We were in talks. We were about to go for our first series round of funding. And I was like, God, can you give me a sign if I can quit my job? And when my boss came to me and was like, yeah, you can't work on your business anymore. And I was like, but if I can't work on my business, what am I gonna do? And so I was like, I gotta go. And we had enough capital, and I said, okay, this is how much money that I'm gonna get paid. I know it's not as much as money I'm making. And we had set up a nice reserve because we were doing income, no kids. And I put on my 2 weeks notice, and my last day I had a party, and I was like, deuces.
Wow. But everyone's exit, out of those roles. Sometimes I think what I'm getting from your story, what I'm hearing you saying is that you just know when you know.
You know.
And sometimes when it's time to leave, it's not when you know is not necessarily the time, but then you begin to start working and building towards making that transition. Right. What would you say are some mistakes people make when they leave their jobs for entrepreneurship? Is it leaving too soon?
I could write a book on this.
Things?
Now, I could write the book
okay,
on how to quit your 9 to 5. Now, I did the first thing, right? I think we had saved up a minimum 6 months. We had cash. Cash was not a problem. So I thought that was good. I was so naive in thinking that everything was just gonna work out. It was just so I had no contingency plan. There was nothing. There was no plan B. And so for most people, that could be okay. But y'all, I found out I was pregnant the month after I quit my job with my first child. And so I just wish I would have had some sort of income or even consulted. I was so naive. I just depended upon the job that was still growing and blossoming way too much.
Well, there's something. What would you all say are some mistakes that people make?
Yeah, there's quite a few mistakes that people make. And I'm gonna come at it from the perspective of, I don't think I made the mistakes because I was thinking about a number of things before I made the exit. So I always said at the beginning of my process that I would fund the dream until the dream was able to fund itself. So I realized that I would have to invest in the business. A lot of times folks was like, oh, I'm gonna take this money and I'm gonna take care of me. Like, no, the money that you make needs to take care of your business so it can grow. So the first thing I think people don't realize is you gotta eliminate debt. Like things that are really unnecessary, pay down debt. Pay down debt so you're not requiring a household budget of $7,000 a month. Because you got to work.
Yeah.
Now, if your household budget requires you to have $1,500, you got some flexibility, you have some margin. So I think the first thing that people do, they don't assess their debt and their cash flow, like what needs to be paid off, and attack those things. So I think that's one of the first things. One of the things also people make big mistakes is, and I did this, you can pilot the programs that you want to sell in your job. Like, so for instance, I was working at a school and then I said, okay, I want to create this system that helps speakers put humor inside of their presentation. I could have done that with my coworkers.
Yeah.
I could have done that with the students that were in my speaking class.
Like beta testers.
So you can test all that. You have that access. So people are so, again, I think so antsy, so eager to go into full-time entrepreneurship that they miss the opportunities that's right there in their face. Like there's an opportunity to grow right where you are.
And that would be my thing. They underestimate the importance of your training ground, right? So you'll have first-year entrepreneurs saying like, I'm gonna build a 6-figure business. You haven't even negotiated a $3 contract. But like wherever you are, the purpose of that is training for what you know is to come. What kind of, there are some things about entrepreneurship that you have to learn on the job, right? I'll give you that. Sure. But there are certain things like how to manage a team. You can have your company pay for that, right? Yeah. Sitting in the room where people are negotiating things, you can find access to those rooms. Understanding the basics of marketing, right? Mm-hmm. Like you can do all of those things as a training ground for what you know is coming so that at least I feel like that's what's made my transition so much easier than like a lot of people that I know. I came out of corporate with a really robust network of my ideal clients. Mm-hmm. So I had low-hanging fruit that I could go to and get revenue really quickly because I had done that in my training ground, right? I had been in a role where I was negotiating multi-million contracts. So I understood what needed to go in my proposal if I was trying to do a 6-figure contract, right? And so like, don't turn your nose up at where you are right now. Get focused on what you need to get from where you are right now that makes the transition a little bit easier.
So what if like, I think in my case, it had nothing to do, like my job, not everybody's job, not everybody's business is like, it's relevant right. to their job, but to that perspective, if it's not, what I did learn was I understood project management. Right. Now that thing I took, and my team was always really like my co-founders. They were like, "Man, you're so good at organizing." We were developing out our hair analysis system. I built the whole thing in Excel first before we sent it to a developer. And they were really like, "How did you do that?" I was like, "Well, I just sit on Excel all day," you know? And so those were the transferable skills that I know for a fact I took from my corporate America. So I don't regret it. I think it would have made it easier if I would have had something that was in direct alignment, I feel like.
So like when you said, I could do my job in 2 hours, immediately I was like, oh, dang, that's 6 hours of networking that she could have done in that company, right? Yeah, like that's like that you can go and meet other people because, so typically one of the reasons that people don't get access to things in corporate, if we're being honest, is because they don't do their job well, right? And so nobody's giving you anything extra, but someone like you who's killing it, she gets her job done. It's excellent. So if you ask for a lunch with a marketing person, they're going to give it to you because they should, if you're a high performer. And so if you're at a job right now where you're like, I'm underutilized, they don't see my potential, whatever, and you can kill it in 3 hours, what are you going to do with the other 5? Because you still got to be there, right? Like what can you get from those people in those 5 hours that they're paying you for that you know when you leave, you can apply it to something else.
That's exactly how it played out when I was doing those presentations. I was on a planning committee for a conference that we were doing for our student leaders. And obviously I had to be in it because it was in my building. And they were brainstorming their topics on what they wanted. And I was like, oh, I can do a presentation on public speaking. I think that would be really helpful to our students. And they were like, great. So we do the conference. And I'll never forget the day I did this workshop. And it was for the students, but all of my colleagues, they sat back and was like, oh, that's what you do. This is what you do, Amber. Like this reservation stuff, like you're good at it, but this is what you do. And that's what led to me getting opportunities really across campus, because there's nothing like speaking for marketing. So I would do workshops, and then I was in one, and a lady from the health center was there, and she was like, can you come do this at the health center? And it kind of worked because I was already, on staff there. So I do think that there is something to be said about taking advantage of that job you hate so much and figuring out how can it serve you while you are preparing.
Because if you're going to show up anyway, you might as well be getting something too.
Get something out of it.
Corporate America is going to take every single drop of blood, sweat, and tears that it can get from you. And if your whole thing is like, I'm just going to resent this the whole way, well, then they win, right? Like they get what they want, and you have nothing. So how do you Lamar talks about fractured focus all the time. Get focused. Yeah. What are you trying to get from this 9 to 5? Because you know you're leaving. Right. You know that you're not going to stay. You know that you want to do X, Y, and Z. If it's a large corporation, somebody in there got something that you need. Absolutely. Get it.
Yeah, and that's in corporate. Higher ed is one thing. There's some similarities, but they're different. In corporate, it literally is about relationships and visibility. It's who knows your name? And the people who are best at playing that game are the ones who can.
I was not good at playing that game. Like I listened, because there's somebody who was a me. Mm-hmm. I got sat in numerous conversations with my higher ups and said, we're just concerned about the culture. I always got the you don't fit the culture. I know. I always got the you don't fit the culture, and I could never. Now that I'm more mature, and I understand now, if I were to ever go back to corporate, I could play the game.
You ain't going back to no
I ain't going back to no corporate. But if I were, or if my children, let's say, go to corporate, like I feel like I could give them this wisdom. One of the things, because I just was a rebel. I just did not want to play their game. I was like, this is fake. And so I understand you have to play the game because you have to do that as an entrepreneur. And fortunately for me, and I wanted to bring this up, although I never went back to corporate America, I did come on as a contract marketer for a small company. So listen, y'all can do this too. Even if you're never going to go back, go work for somebody that can give you the information that you need. So I knew I wanted to learn digital marketing more. And so I got a part-time contract marketing director job. And in that job, y'all, I learned how to set up a full remote virtual team. And like when it came to starting my business, I was like, I learned how to do this. We were building and negotiating, $50,000 to $100,000 mentorship white label. We were white labeling the software for them. And so now going after those type of contracts, that was nothing for me. But if I hadn't went back there and done that for that period, I did it for a year. That was the best thing I could have did that really rounded me out as an entrepreneur.
I had two things that came to mind if you're struggling, if you're one of these folks that are in a job and you're so ready to go, the first thing I would encourage you to do is think of yourself as an intern. Think of yourself as an intern, because interns, they just are coming to learn. Like when you come to a place and I'm an employee, give my check, I'm out. But if you're intern, you're like, okay, so how's this thing work? Yeah. Tell me where to go, what to do, I'm on it. So have the disposition of an intern. The other thing is, figure out what you want to learn and go volunteer in that role. So I worked at a private school. I was the college counselor, but if I wanted to know more about admissions, I could easily say, hey, I want to join the admissions committee and find out, how are you selecting these families? Like, what are the criteria you're using to identify a family? Who makes the wait list? Who doesn't make the wait list? Like, go and volunteer in an area so that you can get more information and data. Because you really make decisions on data and not emotions, but we make a lot of emotional decisions.
I wanted to comment about that too. So there's a few things that I want to say that you brought up a few minutes ago when you were talking about the numbers. That was what was helpful to me, is putting pen to paper to say, so my husband manages our finances, and I said, what is the base number that is required to operate our household? and how much of that does your check cover?
Right.
And then we'll see if I can make. So I went into it knowing what the bare minimum was that I had to make in my work as an entrepreneur, so that my household could still operate. So that if you're on the fence or you're trying to think about it, or if it's right for you, you need data. And that's where that comes from, is what do the numbers even look like? And it might surprise you. And then second, this piece about looking at it as an internship. When I was recruited for the role that I just left in corporate, that was how I looked at it. I said, well, when else will I have an opportunity to basically walk on to a role at one of the big 4 accounting firms? I don't know that I'll have this experience again, so I'll take it to see what I can learn from it, get in there and see, well, what kind of problems are they having that I can solve in my business? And I can just be a high-paid intern. And that was the approach that I took. And it allowed me to not go in with any ego and to really take the experience for what it could be. It helped me to build more relationships and also tap back into speaking corporate language that is beneficial in my work as a consultant. So you have to always think about, what is this situation here to teach me? What can I get from it? And how can I use it in service to what I'm trying to do? And a question, so you were segueing really into the next question that I was going to ask is, what do you wish you had known beforehand? So, Chanel talked about being strategic and some of the things that we're discussing right now in this moment, but Watchen, how about you? You talked about boomeranging and kind of taking a bit of a different path with being on both, playing tennis essentially. So what do you wish you had known?
That making money was not going to be my hardest struggle. There are so many things in entrepreneurship that can take you out that has nothing to do with revenue generation, right? Like there are times where, because if you don't understand cash flow and you make a lot of money, there's drought and famine. That's a basic thing. And I remember being like, how is it that I have this much in receivables? Where my money at? But I didn't know, because I made, net 30, net 6, I wish I had understood, being emotionally sound is probably one of the most important things when you're trying to create something new, right? Having a sense of these are the kinds of things that trigger me and then I spiral, right? These are the types of situations that I shouldn't put myself in entrepreneurially and have somebody that I'm hired who's handling that, because it leads to, I just wish I had known that. Because when you hear entrepreneurs talk, they always talk about their money struggles, right? So you go in thinking I'm gonna have these money struggles and I'm preparing. And then you get there and you don't have those money struggles and you got all these other struggles and you bro, why didn't anybody tell me about this, right? I wish I had known that money was not going to be my biggest problem.
Wow, what about you?
I wish I would have known that I didn't have to be on my corporate schedule at my entrepreneur endeavor. So I thought that I had to have this corporate setup, and I had, and I just didn't give myself any flexibility. So I just wish I would have came into it with some projects. This is what I'm accomplishing. Okay. These are the goals. These are the markers. This is what is, if we're gonna have this done in the first quarter, I would just go and sit and okay, we're working. And I had no direction. And I was waiting for people to call me to give me opportunities, but I wasn't casting vision. Okay. And entrepreneurship is about vision.
And that looks good to everyone else, because look at Mike. He had that desk working.
At the coffee shop with his bag.
But that's corporate trauma, right? Too, because the sense in corporate, just because you're in the office, we know you're working, right? No, people are on Facebook, whatever, right? Because those are the conversations that we're having now, return to work, right? Post-COVID, should people be virtual, hybrid, remote? Well, if I can see them in the office, it means that they're working. It's
actually, it doesn't.
They're probably not.
Yeah.
So for me, it's similar to Watchen. I don't think I have a problem making money. I open my mouth up. I make money for the most part. It's understanding the foundational aspects of business, like cash flow management. My other business, Beyond the Book Media, we were run as an agency, and I didn't understand what's the life cycle a client needs to be in your process, and when are you start losing money? It was those little intricacies that I didn't know. I thought that, okay, if I could just sell, if I can market, which comes very natural to me. But then now, I gotta think about payroll. I didn't understand that aspect, and and it wasn't taught to me because I didn't have any entrepreneurs in my family. I didn't have any entrepreneurs in my family, and so everyone's expectation of me was just make sure you make the money. Right. Just make sure you can have this sort of income coming home. Not, okay, make sure your team is developed. Right. Make sure your cash flow is right. Make sure, like you said, famine and drought. And so I just really hope that those of you that are watching, that you understand that your hardest struggle, like Watchen said, is not making money. It is the organization around the money.
Yeah. It's building a business. We know a lot of solopreneurs in our community, right? But it's like, if you are trying to build a company that stands the test of time beyond you, it's a totally different mindset and a skill set that you have to learn.
Okay, let's do a quick round robin then. So I feel that everything that we've talked about today has been helpful, and it's all been very advice laden as it relates to making this transition. So share a final piece of advice that you maybe wish you had, or that you think could be helpful to someone who might be watching and thinking about, all right, should I stay? Should I go? Mm-hmm. I don't really want to stay. I don't really want to go. All I really want to know is, can we get it together?
I would say get in a community of real entrepreneurs, right?
Define real.
Y'all, they about to be hating on me on it. So, okay, let me choose my words, right? I would say you want to get into a community of people who are building businesses as work, not as hobbies, right? Because if that's where you're going, and it's not to say that the solopreneurs don't matter. It's to say that the vision that you have for your business is different than theirs. So get in community of people at different stages of that, right? So as a baby business, it has been very beneficial to be around people who've been in business for 10 years, right? Because I'm at year 2-ish, right? And so get in community before you make the leap, because you'll see commonalities amongst like, oh, they all made the same mistake, and I'm getting the same kind of advice from people. Maybe that's something I can work on right now. Mm-hmm. I'm hearing that these kinds of pitfalls, maybe that's something. I'm hearing that I'm not as disciplined, and entrepreneurship requires discipline. I can work on that while I'm still getting paid. So get in a community of real entrepreneurs at different stages of their entrepreneurial journey.
Thank you.
I would tell folks to assess how realistic their goal is for entrepreneurship. Oftentimes, people want to get paid for what they like to do and not for what people want to pay them to do. So if there's something that people want to pay you for and you don't want to do that, you need to stay on your job. Mm-hmm. You need to follow the money. You need to solve problems, and you need to assess whether or not, like you just talked about, you were building a business that you do not want to have. If there's the thing that you're doing and you're like, I love doing this, but nobody paying you for it,
keep it as a hobby.
Keep it as a hobby. You don't need to leave your job.
Everything doesn't have to be a business.
It doesn't have to be a business.
Yeah. There you go.
So for me, if I were to tell anyone considering leaving their 9-to-5, is exactly what Watchen said. Like, start building your community and start building your community, but like relationships, like really solid relationships in your industry that you're getting ready to go into. And make sure when you leave, you have your team, you have a coach, you have a therapist.